Feliz was new to the job. She was set to train for the managerial position after being her team's officer in charge for 3 years. Her training would be at the company's headquarters, where she knew absolutely no one. In their small office in the suburbs, everybody knew everybody. One couldn't even sneeze without the entire office knowing. Because of this, Feliz was a bit scared of moving into the big bad city, but this was an opportunity that was hard to come by, so she couldn't just let it pass, especially because of fear. Feliz was confident with her abilities, but she hadn't really been away much from the tight-knit community she grew up in, so the move to the city was something she wasn't too comfortable with. But then again, her personal and professional growth was at stake, so she had no choice but to swallow the fear and live through it. On her first day, she was introduced to so many people that she could barely remember their names. She was then eventually called into a sparsely decorated office where a man was sitting. "Good morning," Feliz called out timidly. When the man looked up to see who spoke, Feliz was drawn into his eyes, so blue she could drown in them. "Hi, I'm Marcus. Have a seat." The man said this smiling. The stunning woman in front of Marcus also captivated him. She was dressed simply, and her face was almost void of makeup, but she looked radiant. Despite her simple choices in clothes and cosmetics, the woman looks like something straight out of a magazine. Suffice it to say that Marcus was drawn. At first, their interaction was awkward, with both feeling attraction towards the other. Gradually, the two found a more comfortable rhythm as Marcus oriented Feliz on what she could expect to happen in the course of her training. Coincidentally, Marcus was in charge of Feliz's training, so it wasn't at all surprising that the two eventually fell for each other. After only a year of dating, Feliz and Marcus were married. Not long after that, Feliz was finally assigned to a branch in need of a new manager. Feliz was more than ready to take on the task. In the beginning, all was well between the couple as they managed to find time for each other amidst their busy schedules. A month passed by. 2, then 3. The branch under Feliz's management encountered a problem, so she was barely able to go home. Of course, Marcus understood. They were from the same company after all. Marcus was aware that even a minuscule problem was supposed to be addressed right away, so it wouldn't have a great impact on the company. After 4 months, Feliz had everything under control. She even managed to swing by restaurants to pick up dinner for Marcus and herself. However, this time, Marcus was rarely home. He spoke of a big project brewing in the headquarters that he wasn't allowed to mention, not even to her. This went on for 2 more months. By this time, the husband and wife had already been married for a year, although neither of them seemed to remember that. They continued to focus on work and tried to spend time together whenever they both had lighter workloads, which wasn't too often. Still, they would see each other at home, even if it was only to say goodnight at night and goodbye in the morning. One day, Feliz was tasked with working on a different brand on a collaboration project. This meant that she would have to spend less time with her husband, and it wasn't much to begin with. But since Marcus was still working on the secret big project, she accepted the new task excitedly. For the project, she was paired with another brand's manager, Gabe. They worked closely together on the project and its grand launch. For 5 months, Feliz and Gabe worked very closely together, more than was necessary. At first, they would just grab dinner together and have a cup of coffee or wine, whichever suited their mood, until eventually they formed a relationship that wasn't supposed to be. After spending a lot of time together, the two fell for each other, but more than physical attraction, they gravitated towards each other because of their similar tastes, may it be in food, music, or even their temperament. They were the same. Both knew what they were getting into. They knew that they were cheating on their respective spouses, but they loved each other too much to cut ties with each other. Their love was greater than the guilt, and so the affair continued. Unknown to them, Feliz's husband had been keeping a mistress too. In fact, it started earlier than Feliz and Gabe's relationship. When Feliz became too busy with work shortly after their marriage, Marcus felt the need to scratch an itch. He may have understood Feliz's circumstances, but that doesn't mean he could set his manly needs aside. One night, after Feliz sent him a message that she couldn't make it home again, he decided to go out. A drink or two and a harmless flirtation won't hurt, Marcus thought. That night, he met Maxine. When their eyes met, he felt sucker-punched. He never felt an attraction this strong, not even with his wife. But since his wife was shirking on her wifely duties anyway, He thought maybe you'd just get it from Maxine. Just this one night, he told himself. However, one night turned into 2, then 3, 4, 5, until then, he and Maxine had been seeing each other each night, and they weren't just seeing each other. At first it was lust, plain and simple, that drew him to Maxine. Then he found companionship, and inevitably he fell utterly in love. But he couldn't just leave his wife because he no longer loved her. They vowed to be together, for better or for worse. For him, with or without love, they had to stay together as man and wife. However, with Thanksgiving fast approaching, he had to decide with whom he would spend it. He would really rather be with Maxine then, as he wished he could stay with her for an entire day and night, as they had never done that before. They always had to sneak into their respective marital beds at night. So Marcus made sure to be home early that night and prepared dinner. He texted Feliz and said that the food was ready and waiting. A bit baffled and curious too, Feliz went straight home instead of having dinner with Gabe, as had been her routine as of late. At dinner, Marcus brought up random topics, as if he were just sharing how his day went by with his wife. Feliz just listened and contributed to the conversation from time to time. Eventually, Marcus eased into the topic of Thanksgiving and their subsequent plans. Feliz, who had already made plans with Gabe for then, quickly made excuses. "Oh, right, it'll be Thanksgiving soon, but honey, I'm sorry, I won't be home then. I'll be out of town for business." How fortunate. This is easier than I anticipated, Marcus thought to himself. Really? Well, that's great. I didn't know how to tell you that a very important client invited me and a few others to their home, but the thing is we have to fly there, so I'd be gone for 2 days. Oh, not to worry. I'd be gone for about the same time. What a coincidence. And it's even better that it works for both of us, Feliz said happily. She expected a bit of prodding once she told her husband she wouldn't be home for the holiday, so it pleased her immensely that things turned out this way. Husband and wife chatted easily for the rest of dinner, each delighted they would be spending Thanksgiving with their respective lovers without their spouse knowing. Neither of them had any clue the other was cheating. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Marcus kissed his wife goodbye as he excitedly drove over to pick up Maxine. They were driving to a place where not one soul would recognize them. It was there Marcus brought Feliz right before their wedding. He was familiar with the place, and what a beautiful place it was. Plus, they wouldn't run into anyone they knew. Meanwhile, a few hours after Marcus departed, Feliz drove to the airport. She and Gabe were flying to Somerville, a quaint and quiet town. She'd been there once with Marcus, and she fell in love with the place. Might not be an ideal place for them to go, but it was the only place she knew for sure she wouldn't see Marcus. And she also wanted to show Gabe the place she'd dreamed of living once she was older, a place she'd dreamed she'd share with Gabe, if only they were not married to their respective spouses. There she rented a small cottage, well, half the cottage. The owner, an elderly couple, has since moved to a smaller house and decided to make their 4-bedroom home a transient home for travelers. But since a 4-bedroom house may be too big, as the travelers who visit their town are mostly couples, they renovated the house and made it into 2 different dwellings. Although from the outside, it looked like it was just one massive house. When they arrived, Feliz and Gabe washed up before they went out to eat. There was a small restaurant at the end of the block, and it served good food. Luckily, there weren't a lot of people there. While deciding where to sit, Feliz's eyes strayed to the familiar backside of a man in one corner of the room. She stared long enough that it caught Gabe's attention, and he asked, "Why? You see someone you know?" When Gabe followed Feliz's line of vision, he froze on the spot. "Maxine?" he said softly. But apparently it wasn't too soft, as the woman looked straight at them when she heard her name. "Gabe," Maxine said aghast. "Who?" said the man seated across from her. The man swung his head to look at whoever caught Maxine's attention, and he was stunned to see his wife there. "What are you doing here, Feliz? Have you resorted to following me?" Marcus was defensive. Feliz, on the other hand, stood stock still. She didn't know which was more shocking, being in the same place with her husband and lover, or finding out that her husband was cheating on her too. Maxine was the first to collect herself, as Gabe was still staring dumbly at them. "Come on, let's talk somewhere more private," Maxine told Gabe. "Wait, what?" Feliz asked. She didn't understand why or how Maxine knew Gabe. "She's my wife," Gabe explained. "What?" Marcus said loudly, as he wasn't able to hide his shock. But then he caught himself and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." The 2 couples started walking in the same direction, and they came to the house. Marcus and Maxine started towards the left side of the house, while Gabe and Felice walked towards their side. It was then that they realized that not only were they in the same little town, but they were staying under a single roof with just a wall between them. Felice took the lead and said, "Let's talk here," thinking that where they talked would be the least of their problems. Marcus and Maxine followed her. Inside, Gabe and Felice were sitting on the couch, while Marcus and Maxine remained standing, their backs against the wall. There were no theatrics, no tears, no shouting. It was as if they were just two couples hanging out together, not married couples who just found out their spouse was cheating. "It's quite ironic, isn't it?" Maxine said out of the blue. "My husband is sitting beside you, holding you protectively as if I'd pounce on you," she told Felice. "And yet your husband's here, not leaving my side. Well, it's obvious that there's no sense talking about betrayal and whatnot given our situation. Now the question is, where do we go from here?" Felice returned. "I don't know when it started, but one day I woke up and I no longer loved you. It was long before I met Felice," Gabe said. "Well, maybe because I, too, stopped loving you in the course of our marriage," Maxine countered. "I wasn't supposed to love Maxine, but I did. I do, and I'm sorry, Felice. But I'd rather be with her," said Marcus. With that, Maxine professed her love for Marcus too. Gabe and Felice also expressed their intent to stay together. Eventually, they sat down to dinner, all four of them, and talked about what to do. They decided to get divorced, both couples, and agreed to be discreet with their respective relationships until enough time had passed that people wouldn't judge them for having relationships right after the divorce. But instead of staying in town, they decided to go home with their spouses. After all, they loved each other enough at one point that they decided to get married, and they owe their partner at least an explanation, as well as an amicable parting. However, it didn't take long before the couples filed for divorce. They sold their houses and moved to different towns, this time with the person they truly loved. The following year, Gabe and Felice bumped into Marcus and Maxine only days after Thanksgiving. It was as if fate was playing a joke on them, but like their first confrontation, there was no bitterness this time either. Felice smiled at them and asked, "How's life going for you two lovebirds?" Marcus smiled back and said, "We're happier. I hope you guys are too." They bid goodbye and went their ways.